Hey guys, Dr. Justin Marcagiani here. Today we are doing a live video, going to hit on a couple of different topics. We'll see. We're going to do a little improv, so feel free to put your comments down below. Love to see what you guys want to chat about. All right. So in the world today, what is up? So big thing I think out of the gate people are really concerned about is mitochondrial health. That's a big kind of thing that I see in kind of the zeitgeist of the health world today, right? Mitochondria is where you generate energy, ATP. Typically, all that energy is going to come from protein, fats, and carbohydrates. And so you have proteins coming down, they all get funneled into acetyl CoA. You have carbohydrates go through glycolysis into acetyl CoA. And then you have fatty acids going into acetyl CoA. That acetyl CoA dumps into the mitochondria or into the Krebs cycle or citric gas cycle, pumps around twice. You're going to pump out about 6 NADH, 2 FADH2. This is going to generate some ATP. It's going to dump out that FADH and FADH2 and NADH into the electron transport chain, and we're going to generate about 33 units of ATP. So this is the general cycle. Protein, fats, and carbs into acetyl-CoA around the cycle twice. To make that cycle work, we need B vitamins, we need magnesium, we need amino acids, we need certain nutrients. Things like heavy metals, things like mold, lead, mercury, different toxins. This is going to junk this whole thing up. So very important. We want to generate energy. We want to make sure we have the nutrients to run that Krebs cycle. To run that, we need B vitamins, magnesium, amino acids. We need to make sure we're also not getting exposed to toxins. Toxins are going to come in the water. They're going to come in the air, especially if there's mold in your home or apartment. And they may also come in your food, especially if your food is not organic. So those are the big things I see out of the gate. People are complaining about energy issues. So we have the mitochondrial factor. We talked about the macronutrients, the protein, fats, and carbs, the acetyl-CoA, how that runs around the citric acid cycle or Krebs cycle, how it funnels into the electron transport chain. We talked about the nutrients. Now, also thyroid plays a big role too, because thyroid helps with energy, metabolism, all right? Thyroid hormone, there's receptor sites for thyroid hormone on every single cell of the body. So if we don't have enough thyroid hormone, overall metabolism will be lower because that thyroid hormone binds to a receptor site. It's going to impact RNA, DNA transcription. It's going to impact metabolism. The biggest thing we see with low thyroid, cold hands, cold feet, slow bowel movements, mood issues, outer third of the eyebrow going, hair loss. And so we got to look deep. When we have energy issues, the first box we check off, if there's cold hands, cold feet, hair loss, is thyroid. We're also going to then look at the adrenals because the adrenals play a major role with cortisol. Cortisol helps with energy. Cortisol has a natural circadian rhythm, right? So cortisol should be higher in the morning. It's going to help with energy. It's going to help with inflammation. It's going to help with stress, and it should go down throughout the day. So when we get chronically stressed, chronically inflamed, the first thing we're going to see is aberrant rhythms in cortisol, whether it's lower in the morning and then higher throughout the day, or we're high, low, high. I call it the pinball rhythm effect. So that affects mood, that affects energy. And the next thing is going to be, so we hit the thyroid, we hit the adrenals, and the mitochondria. Those are the big three vectors on how your body is going to produce energy. So very important out of the gate. And then everything that feeds that, it's all about inflammation, right? So inflammation, nutrient density, and avoiding toxicity. So when it comes to inflammation, the big vectors of that are going to be your processed grains, flours, your processed junky vegetable oils, right? Vegetable oils are oxidized because of how you process them, mostly. The exceptions would be like a cold press, olive oil, maybe a palm. Obviously, coconut oil is a saturated fat, and some olive or avocado if it's cold pressed. Most all other fats, they're totally junky. Just go on YouTube, type in, how is canola oil made? And it's absolutely gross. You want to throw up. They have to use hexane and all kinds of deodorants just to make it look nice and clean and even smell good. So not good. So your vegetable oils, your processed fatty acids, you're going to be your processed grains and flours, and then just any added sugar. But those are mostly going to be processed products. You're not going to get that with some fruit, some vegetables, some starch, some meats. It's going to be usually the processed stuff. Let me hit a couple of questions here while we're going along the way. Is keto a stress on the body once you're adapted? So it just depends, right? Keto, let's just define keto because we have a lot of these tag words, but what does it actually mean? So ketosis is nothing more than your body utilizing ketones for fuel. You're starting to spit out more ketones, and your body has an energy reservoir outside of glucose to use for fuel. And so for most people, this is getting your macronutrients, your carbohydrates, typically 50 grams or less. Now, if you're really active and you're you're already exercising a lot. Some people can be in ketosis at 100, 200, 300 grams of carbohydrate if you're really active, right? If you're running a lot, you're exercising, lifting weights. So that may change depending on your activity and how much you're using your muscles. But ketosis, for the most part, is going to be around that 50 net carbohydrates. What's a net carb? That's your carbs minus the fiber. And if you're eating something with some sugar alcohols in it, you would subtract that too. So a good way you can take a look is get a Keto Mojo. This is probably the best thing. And you can test your blood sugar on it. Here it is. Test your blood sugar on it, which is nice. But they also have the ability to look at ketones. And so when you look at it, for instance, you get these strips. Let me just show you how that looks. So you're going to get the blue strips are going to be blood sugar strips. Should say blood sugar on there. Yep. And then the brown ones are going to be ketones. Do I have that messed up? Let's see here. Yep, blood ketones. So I'm sorry, blue is ketones, brown is blood sugar. And so that's how you can measure it. We want to be around I'd say closer to 1 millimole is going to be the ideal amount for ketones. So that's going to tell you. Now, the problem is as your body gets more keto adapted, you may have less ketones, right? In the urine or in the breath. And so a blood test is going to be a better one because you can actually see what is circulating in your body that you can use. Some people will use the urine keto strips for the pee. Not going to be the best. Early on, it'll be good because your body doesn't know how to use it, the ketones, well. And then as it gets more efficient, there'll be less ketones that are being dumped in the urine, and your body will be efficiently using it better. Now, big thing with blood sugar, real quick, is when we have ketone issues, when we're not keto adapted, we want to see our blood sugar snake along throughout the day. That's key because the more our blood sugar snakes along throughout the day, we don't make as much insulin, cortisol, and adrenaline. So insulin, when our blood sugar peaks up really fast, usually it's too much carbohydrates, too much inflammation. The faster it goes up, the more insulin we make. Insulin then takes that hormone, takes the blood sugar, and brings it back down. It opens up the gates so glucose can go into the cell. So insulin goes up. When insulin's high, your body cannot burn fat for fuel. It's very hard. If you look at the enzymes like hormone-sensitive lipase, these are lipolytic enzymes. That just means lipo means fat. Lytic means to break down. So these are enzymes that break down fat so you can take that fatty acid, take that glycerol backbone and ketones, and we can use it for fuel. When ketones are high, those enzymes are very low. When insulin is high, those digestive fat breaking down enzymes are very, very low. And so we have to make sure we get insulin down. So our blood sugar goes up like this, and the faster it goes up, the faster it comes back down, or the faster it goes up and the longer it stays up, that means more insulin. So step one is it goes up really fast and comes back down. This is called reactive hypoglycemia. High blood sugar, typically high insulin, over responding, it crashes down. Adrenaline issues, cortisol issues, this is where you're shaky, this is where you're irritable, this is where you're lightheaded, this is where you're moody, because you're on this blood sugar roller coaster and there's hormones in the background trying to level everything out. So that's step one. Step two is your blood sugar goes up and it just stays up. And it takes forever to go down. Now what's happening here, more insulin resistance, more, let's just say, you're going to break down or you're going to decrease your lipolytic enzymes. So now you're burning sugar all day and you're not tapping into your body fat. And so this keeps up over time. You're going to be more accumulating fat versus burning fat. You want to consume fat, you want to consume good food, but you want your body to be also utilizing your body fat for fuel. That's the ultimate fuel source. My analogy with patients is you start a fire, you want to put some logs in the fire. You want those logs to burn for hours. You don't want to sit there putting twigs, putting paper, putting lighter fluid in the fire because you'll just be there every 5 or 10 minutes. That's most people. When people tell you like, oh, I'm just a kind of a grazer, I eat all day, you're just feeding the fire with paper, with twigs, with gasoline. You really want to make sure that you're putting logs in the fire. And so with blood sugar, if your blood sugar goes up a little bit and then kind of snakes down throughout the day. So my first kind of 1 hour, I want my blood sugar. Well, first at fasting, I want it below 100. Let's say 90-ish, maybe 80 to 90 is fine. If it's a little bit higher, that's okay because in the morning, blood sugar can go a little higher because of the dawn phenomenon. You have cortisol increases in the morning. That can cause that blood sugar to go up a little bit outside of just your diet. That first hour, you want that blood sugar 120 to 140 or lower, 120 to 140 or lower. And then hour 2, we want it below 100, definitely below 120. And then hour 3, we want it below 100 again. Let me just test mine and see where I'm at. Let's see if I'm practicing when I'm preaching. We'll see. I'll do it for you guys. All right, so pretty straightforward with these guys here. I've done a video before. I like the Keto Mojo because it graphs it. So when I talk about this 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour thing, you got to write it down. Use your like notes thing on your iPhone or something. But with the Keto Mojo, it'll connect to your phone and it'll graph it out for you. And then you just create an account with the website or have it linked to your phone and you're good to go. Like no problems at all. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, the one thing about this, I killed the batteries in it because it makes this annoying beeping sound when the battery is low. And it's like, that's the last thing I need to hear all day long. So I forgot to do that. I'll do that later. Okay. Might be. So in general, blood sugar, right? Keep it up below, 120 to 140 in that first hour, ideally below 120, back below 120, hour 2, ideally below 100, and then hour 3, definitely below 100. That gives you a pretty good idea that you're going to be more ketogenic, you're burning more fats, and you're more keto adapted overall. So that's really important out of the gates. Is it true that oxytocin reduces cortisol? Absolutely. Right. If you look at you look at women who are breastfeeding, right? Just go type in oxytocin and sleep deprivation. So you'll find women that actually breastfeed, right? They're up at all hours of the night because the kid, the 3-month-old's waking you up to feed here or there, which is totally normal. But guess what? That stimulation from the feeding stimulates prolactin, stimulates oxytocin, and that actually helps with sleep deprivation. So if you go on PubMed, type in oxytocin and sleep deprivation, you'll see there's positive benefits of that. That's why if you are a breastfeeding mom, you want to be breastfeeding. It's super important. That'll help with the baby, but that'll also help prevent postpartum depression because of the sleep issues. So oxytocin is going to be vital, one, for connection with the baby. Two, it's going to help you from being sleep deprived. So very important there out of the gate. All right. So a couple other questions here for you guys out of the gate here. So keto adapted, once you're keto adapted and the blood sugar roller coaster, is it less stress in the body? So from there, you have to adjust. So I tell patients out of the gate, you have to look at things and adjust. People that are insulin resistant already, how do you know? You have as a guy, you should be at like a 0.7, 0.8 taper. Take the width of the hips or the shoulders and the width of the waist. You should be at, 0.8, 0.7. Right? Is that golden ratio. So whatever the hips are, whatever the waist is, you should be 70 to 80% of what the shoulders are. So it should kind of be this V taper. As soon as you start going more flat or going out in the belly, that's a sign of insulin resistance because that belly is starting. That's your kind of insulin/cortisol meter. So as a guy, that's a pretty good rule of thumb. I mean, for a female, you could probably say greater than, 30 inches or so in the waist. That's a sign that insulin resistance is starting to happen. Okay. And you could do your blood sugar testing like I just gave you here, right? The fasting 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour. And then you can get your carbohydrates in a good place. And I recommend, coming hardcore for the first couple of weeks to a month, keeping the carbohydrates below 50, maybe even below 30 if you have a lot of extra weight on you, and seeing how you do for the first 2 to 4 weeks. And then from there, moving back into a cyclical keto type of approach. That means you're keeping the carbs very low in the morning. Maybe you even do a modified protein sparing fast where you keep the collagen maybe in your coffee at 20 grams or less. That gives you protein, but not enough to negate or not enough to increase mTOR, which is going to have a lot of that's mammalian to targeted rapamycin. That's going to help the benefits of stem cell recycling or stem cell stimulation, cellular autophagy, protein recycling. And so the more protein you eat in the morning, the more that's going to bump up mTOR. So if we come in there with some collagen, maybe in our coffee or tea, maybe a little MCT oil, you have a little fat, you have a little protein, right? You keep it simple. That's going to give you a little bit of nutrition, but it's also not going to spike your mTOR. So you're getting some good insulin reduction effects there. And then you have a nice, pretty low carb meal at lunch, vegetables, meat, and then maybe every now and then you come in with some higher carbohydrates at nighttime, a little bit of starch. And it all depends where you're at. I tell patients that are overweight, maximize your benefits, plateau, and then start playing around with adding a little bit of starch in at nighttime. If you're already at a pretty good weight, then you may just want to be typical keto. You keep the carbs down the first meal or two a day and then bring some carbs in at dinner time. It's controversial, right? People say, well, eat your carbs in the morning because you have time to burn them throughout the day. It's like, yeah, but do you need carbohydrates in the morning? If you have a lot of cortisol in the morning, which cortisol should be 4 to 5 times higher in the morning than any part of the day. Well, cortisol mobilizes glucose. So if you're mobilizing more glucose in the morning, why would I need to add more glucose to my bloodstream if it's already mobilizing due to a hormonal spike of cortisol? Well, okay, that makes sense. So you're spiking cortisol in the morning, so you need less glucose in your body. The only, I would say, deviation to that if you're doing a lot of exercise. So if you're doing exercise, maybe you come in post-workout, maybe you add some starch, maybe you add some kind of a glucose in your shake post-workout because you're trying to get that insulin stimulation to really help with protein synthesis of the muscle. So it just depends where you're at. But out of the gate, I always say, hey, you got a lot of glucose in your bloodstream already because of the morning cortisol spike. That's called the dawn phenomenon or the Somogyi effect. So just use that extra glucose from your cortisol. Use that. Don't add more glucose in, with the exception being activity. And then nighttime or afternoon, ride that in through afternoon. And then nighttime, play around with adding some starch in, maybe a little bit of fruit. And I'm fine adding a little bit of fruit in at lunchtime too. Just play around with it. If you're at a healthier weight, you can play around with it. If you are already exercising or getting a lot of steps in, you have the ability to manage glucose better. Like I'll go and have my glucose, I'll eat a little bit too much carbs at lunch. I'll go walk for 30 minutes and my blood sugar is totally fine. So if you're adding in some activity, you can manage that glucose by just wringing out the muscle, right? Using it. That's like wringing out a sponge. Now that sponge has more absorptive qualities, meaning your muscle has burnt glycogen. Now it can suck up more glycogen from the bloodstream. So then you're not taking that glucose and putting it in the muscle as fat. You're actually soaking it back up as glycogen. The questions here. Can we ask anything? Yes, that's totally fine. Yeah, so the 30-inch waist. I mean, it just depends, right? It depends kind of what part of the body you're doing. But I think for women, what's the hip to waist size that we want to look at? For guys, I think the golden ratio is like 0.7 to 0.8. So you want, your waist to be 20 to 30% less than what your shoulder width is. Okay. And then healthy waist to hip for female, because some women just they have more hips, and so they have to look at that. So so you'd be looking at about 0.8 for women, 0.8 to 0.9. That just means the widest part of your hips should be about 20% wider than your waist. All right, so pretty simple on that one. So if you're at 35 inches, then you're probably at about a 40-inch hip, something like that. So you can just run that into a calculator. 0.7 or so, 0.75 to 8 for a guy, 0.8 for a female. All right, bigger numbers should be the shoulder for guys. The bigger number should be the hips for women. That gives you a pretty good idea where you're at. Good questions. Doctors want to do a laparoscopy for endo, but show no symptoms. Any symptoms not really talked about that I should be looked for? I don't have it. So I need a little more feedback on what you mean laparoscopy. So laparoscopy is a type of procedure where they put a scope and look into your abdomen, but what are they looking at? They're looking at your pancreas. They're looking at another type of organ there. What's happening there? Oh, I'm trying for a baby. So I'm guessing they're looking at ovaries. So what are they looking for? They're looking at, I'm going to guess if it's a laparoscopy, maybe they're looking at endometriosis or some kind of tissue growth on the outside. Because if it was inside, it would be a hysteroscopy. They may be looking at like a fibroid internally in the uterus. But if it's outside, I'm going to guess it's probably endometriosis. Let me know a little more about that. Okay, cool. I have some dry sinuses. When I go for walks, my nasal passages become irritated, bleeds and scabs like this for a week, causing massive headaches. Is there a way to repair the mucuses? So first off, I mean, is this just because you're in a very dry environment? Like is this happen all times of the year or only when it's very dry? That's number one. Number two is do a good sinus flush. Make sure your sinuses are dialed in. A good sinus flush, use a good reverse osmosis, saline base or distilled water. Use some of the Neomed packets and flush out the sinuses. That can be a great way. Is there any infection? Is there any residual from a previous sinus infection? Try to clean out the sinuses. That's the first thing I would look at out of the gate. And then anytime mucous membranes are overly dry, make sure you're getting enough omega-3s. I would probably get cod liver oil omega-3s, get the extra vitamin A and the fat-soluble vitamins. Make sure you're getting good healthy fats and cholesterol to help build healthy cell membranes and cell walls. That's the big thing I'd make sure we're on top of. Also, make sure you're not overdoing NAC. Too much NAC can cause you to dry out too. Good questions there. Should you take HCl before bed meals without it burning your stomach lining from laying down? That's a great question. So I would say it depends on how fast food in your stomach gets released into your small intestine. So the average person is like 90 minutes to 2 hours. And so if it's inside of 2 hours, I would not take HCl before bed because Now you're going to be laying horizontal. That acid can then move up into your throat. In general, though, if you're healthy, you're making acid anyway. So it just depends upon how inflamed you are and if you can handle it. People that have good digestion, good HCl levels, they tend to close that esophageal sphincter really well. So acid from the stomach cannot go into the esophagus. So it depends. But I would typically say, yeah, you shouldn't be eating a big meal before bed because of that reason. But I have some patients that have gastroparesis where that food sits in their stomach much longer than most. And these are the people that we are instructing, 3 to 4 hours before bed, maybe a lighter meal, maybe more enzymes, less acid. And then we may also be using some bitters or some natural prokinetics to ensure that we are helping to move the intestinal tract better. Yeah. So you said you're looking for endometriosis. Yeah. So let me know what your question is. So yeah, okay, they're doing a laparoscope. They're looking at endometriosis. So what's your question on that? Okay. How can we naturally treat a hiatal hernia? Okay. So the first thing is you have to get the inflammation down because typically a hiatal hernia is here's your diaphragm. Okay. Here's your esophagus. It goes through the diaphragm. And then your stomach, you have the top of this is like I think it's the fundus is the top and then the antrum is the bottom. So you have your stomach right here. And so what happens is your stomach starts to go above and then your diaphragm starts to, obviously it's tight, right? So it's squeezing that down. And so then food that comes through can kind of get stuck a little bit here. So the first thing is you got to get the inflammation in the stomach down. So make sure your food's good. Make sure there's no food allergens. Make sure you're digesting and breaking things down. Second, make sure there's no bugs or H. pylori up there. Anytime inflammation happens, these nerves that go to your stomach, let's see, what would that be? Maybe C7, C8, T1, T2, T3 in that area. Those nerves get irritated. That's going to basically cause the muscles around that area to get tight. Think of gallbladder. If you have a gallbladder issue, what starts to happen? Your shoulder gets really sore. Or if you have ovary issues because you have hormonal imbalances, right? PMS. Oh, I have back pain. Oh, I have, hip pain, right? It's like, well, it's not the joint, not the muscle. It's really the organ, the actual organ tissue, but it's refluxing to the nerves. Or common one is heart attack. What happens? Left jaw pain, left arm pain, right? Because those nerves are on that same two-way highway. So those sensory nerves to the organs can influence the tissue sensory nerves to the muscles as well. And so get that inflammation down. You can do different exercises. There's like one where you lift your arms up. And so you're basically like lifting the diaphragm up and then you're dropping it like this while like swallowing some water. So the goal of that is it's basically you're trying to like flick the diaphragm down, right? Flick it down. Not fixing the underlying issue. It's more palliative. You can get in there with a massage gun. Where's mine? It's over there. But you can get in there with a massage gun. Use a nice softer head. I come in there with the middle dampener head here. You can do the bigger head. Theragun's the better one to do. So here's the big head. Here's the medium head. And you can come in there and then you can just get this tissue right in here. Or you can use a skinnier thumb head too. Like this. And then just try to gently relax and massage that tissue just to relax the tissue around it because it could be inflamed. But again, any physical medicine, physical manipulation work you do, you have to make sure the internal tissue is relaxed by getting the H. pylori down, making sure you're eating really good foods and you're digesting all those foods well. That's going to be key. Again, surgeries and all that, it's going to be palliative and you're not really fixing the underlying issue. Again, it's going to depend. If that hole's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, they may have to come in there and sew it tight. But I would tell you most times it's not fixing the underlying issue. It's people with gallbladder pain. I've seen so many people get their gallbladder removed and guess what? It's like they still have pain in that area. Maybe it's in and around the stomach. Maybe it's the common hepatic, duct now. You're not fixing it a lot of times. Okay, great. Good questions, guys. I was looking for symptoms. I don't think I have any. Also, is there a good way to get rid of it? I do have endometriosis. Sorry for the confusion. Okay. Yeah. So you have to look at why you have endometriosis. And so the big telltale sign of endometriosis is very painful periods. And endometriosis is just the essentially endometrial tissue, which grows. So here's your uterus, inside the uterus, right? Okay. And this tissue here, that's endometrial tissue. Endometriosis is that tissue growing anywhere else but there. So you'll see it on the outside of the uterus, or you'll see it on top of the ovaries, or it'll go on top of the bladder or the colon or the intestines, right? that tissue is spreading. Now, why does it spread? There's usually a component of estrogen dominance influencing it. So some kind of hormonal component. And so birth control pills, some will say birth control pills help it, right? Which for me does not make sense, because if hormones are driving it, and when you give birth control pills, you're artificially bumping up someone's hormone levels 3 to 5x, wouldn't that be a factor, right? Obviously, environmental estrogens and plastic, pesticides, all those things, making sure that your detoxification pathways are good. A lot of the detoxification comes from protein to make glutathione, a lot of sulfur-rich compounds to make DIM and indole 3-carbinol. These are compounds that help with detoxification. And so we want good, healthy sulfur compounds, whether it's from healthy animal products, animal proteins, whether it's from cruciferous rich vegetables. These are going to help with detoxification. You have to look at the input. Where are the hormones coming from? Are they coming from birth control pills? Are they coming from foods, pesticides, inorganic meats, those kind of things, conventional meats, right? Factory farming meats. Also, let's look at your progesterone levels. Do you have estrogen dominance? Is your progesterone out of whack? Because you can have estrogen problems without having high estrogen. Your estrogen could just be relatively higher than progesterone. So progesterone, let's say in the luteal phase around day 20, should be around 15 to 20. I think it's PG per ml in your blood test. But let's say it's at 8, and then estrogen's where it should be. Well, even though estrogen's good, you still have estrogen dominance, because estrogen in relationship to progesterone is out of whack. So you have to look at all those factors. And on a Dutch test, we'll also look at glutathione levels. We'll look at the 2-methoxy, 2-hydroxy estrogen metabolite, which tells us how you're metabolizing your estrogen too. Very important. And then from there, you can do other nutrients, like I mentioned, some of these cruciferous compounds. With fibroids, we'll do different things. We'll do EGCGs. We may do some resveratrol. We may do systemic enzymes as well to kind of help break things down. But it depends on how bad it is. Sometimes it's better off to have them go in and laser it off. That can be pretty non-invasive. There's adenomyosis, which is different. That's where you have tissue growth in the muscle that's a little more obtrusive. Think of like a donut with jelly in the middle. When they squish it, that's kind of adenomyosis, a little bit different. Good questions, guys. Is vertigo linked to anxiety and depression? I tend to have terrible vertigo unless I take trepoline. I think that may be an antihistamine. I've been taking it for stomach pain, but it helps with vertigo as well. I mean, it depends, right? Because if you have vertigo issues, a lot of times vertigo can be connected to adrenal issues and electrolytes. And so if you have adrenal issues, you may not be managing your blood sugar well. You may have inflammation, and that could be driving cortisol imbalances, maybe adrenaline imbalances. Because when cortisol starts to go out of whack, usually there's adrenaline behind it that's out of whack as well. And then also with vertigo, there could be an autoimmune component. I've seen a lot of patients who have vertigo also have Hashimoto's. And then also there could be electrolyte issues, low potassium, low magnesium, and all those things can play a role. So when you look at vertigo, you got to look at the autoimmune thyroid component. You have to look at the gut component. Are you eating good foods? Are you eating good nutrition? Because most autoimmune issues happen in the gut. So if there's gut issues, that can drive the autoimmune problems. And then how are the adrenals looking? Do we have good electrolyte support? Are we hydrating well? Are we managing our blood sugar throughout the day? These are all important questions you want to ask yourself. Can you lab diagnose an autoimmune issue? So, I mean, your conventional lab diagnosis will be like an ANA marker, which is an anti-nuclear antibody. It's really non-specific. And then they'll look at, is it like, what is it like? Is it speckle cell? There's different types of variations of the ANA they'll look at. And like, let me just give it to you. ANA variations. That's like your conventional diagnosis. Now, I've seen so many patients go in remission from that. I've also seen, patients have they have ANA, but like a conventional medical person can't figure out what that means. So you're going to have speckled cell, you're going to have nucleolar, you're going to have cytoplasmic C, you're going to have centromere, a speckled cytoplasm. These are just different variations. And so you can have them. One may mean lupus, one may mean scleroderma, one may mean RA. So these are, one may mean Sjogren's, right? And so these are different patterns. So like, for instance, a speckle pattern may be a Sjogren's pattern. So an ANA test is just usually a general screening. Sometimes they'll run inflammation markers along with it, like a SED rate, or maybe HSCRP, or maybe they'll run something more specific like an RA latex or an HLA-B27. Most conventional medical people are used to running, especially like a rheumatologist, running some of these markers. But a lot of times, okay, you have this marker, now what's the next step? If it's a serious condition, right, maybe lupus, maybe they're running some kind of putting you on some kind of a biologic or immunosuppressant. So even when these things come back, they're never really getting to the root underlying issue. That's the problem. And so you're on medications that are going to have side effects, or they're running like, is it Plaquenil, right? That's basically chloroquine, right? So they may run these different markers or different medications that just suppress the immune system a little bit. So you're still not getting to the underlying issue. So that's your general things. I really look at what the driving factors of an autoimmune condition are. And so I'm always going to be looking at foods. I'm always going to be looking at the gut, because that's going to tell me a ton about the immune function and where to start. Conventional medicine is going to use steroids. They're going to use immunosuppressants. They're going to use maybe anti-inflammatory drugs to control the symptoms. They're very rarely going to get to the underlying root issue. Now, if someone's really, I see patients with an ulcerative colitis flare where they're just massive diarrhea, massive blood. There may be a time and a place for something to just kind of calm things down while you then work on it. So there may be a time and a place to add something in that provides a little bit of stability, but just knowing that this is not going to fix the root issue. This is just going to get us a little bit stable while we then go deeper from there. Okay, great. Good questions, guys. Good questions. Hormonal imbalances can cause a lot of problems. Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's just the problem with conventional medicine is they're only going to look at hormonal imbalances if it's pathological. On a functional medicine standpoint, we're going to look at, hey, is there a functional imbalance here? Is this less than optimal, right? Less than optimal, or hey, we're not at a good level for you to feel your best. We're looking at it with a different lens versus there's a lot of leeway between being less than optimal and having a pathological disease. And so most people get left in this middle ground of like, no, you're fine. You're fine. It's like you're totally okay, even though you're not. So you want to look at it more holistically. Yeah, no problem. You're totally welcome. Absolutely. Is it okay to supplement 600 milligrams of magnesium per day? Well, first off, what kind of magnesium? Because if it's like a glycinate or a threonate, that may not be necessary to do that much, right? If it's a magnesium citrate, that's less absorbed. That's fine. I would say as long as you're not having overly loose stools or having diarrhea because of it, I think it's fine. Magnesium is one of those things, if you take too much orally, you're going to get loose stools. Your body will regulate that. Again, some of the better magnesiums, a malate or a glycinate, typically they're so well absorbed, you don't need to take that much, usually between 100 and 300 to 400. But as long as you're not having loose stools, that's a great sign. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you did, please let me know. Love to see it in the comments. Share with friends or family. Also, if you want to dive in deeper, if you need functional medicine support and you want to dive in deeper, there'll be a link down below where you can reach out and schedule and dive in for more support if you need that. All right, guys, thanks so much. Have a good day.